A 7-year-old girl stood up in court and declared, "I am my mum's lawyer." The judge initially thought it was a joke until he realized she knew more about law than many seasoned attorneys. "I am my mum's lawyer," said Lily, a 7-year-old girl standing before the judge, a folder of papers in her small hands, her chin held high as if she were a professional with decades of experience. The courtroom fell into absolute silence, as if someone had paused the world for a few seconds. Judge Robert Smith, a 58-year-old man with 3 decades of experience, slowly removed his glasses and carefully cleaned them, as if he couldn't see straight. Never in his entire career had he witnessed anything like this. A child presenting herself as a lawyer in his courtroom. "Excuse me, young lady, but I think you're mistaken. This is a courtroom, not a place for games," he said gently, thinking the girl had lost her parents. "I'm not playing, Your Honor," Lily replied, her voice firm, but her heart racing. "I'm here to represent my mother, Jane Doe, in custody case number 003450224. My father, John Doe, is trying to gain custody of me for ulterior financial motives." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Lawyers stopped checking their phones. Staff dropped their pens. Secretaries turned to get a better look. Even the security guard at the door moved closer, curious about this unprecedented situation. On the right side of the room, John Doe, 42, dressed in an expensive dark suit, began to laugh, loudly. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The girl is playing school. We can't waste time with childishness." Beside him, his private attorney, Mr. Davis, an elegant, arrogant 50-year-old man in a high-priced suit, immediately stood up. "Your Honor, I earnestly request that the minor be removed from the room. This is disrespectful to the court and legal procedures." But Lily didn't move an inch. Her brown eyes shone with a determination that belied her age. "Your Honor, according to Article 28 of the Child and Adolescent Statute, I have the right to be heard in any judicial proceeding that involves my interests." Silence returned to the courtroom, but this time it was different. It was the silence of shock. A 7-year-old girl had just cited a specific law with the precision of an experienced jurist. Mr. Davis blinked several times, trying to process what he had heard. "She memorized some phrases from the internet, Your Honor. Any child can do that nowadays with a search engine." "Then may I continue, Counselor?" Lily turned to him with disarming politeness. "Article 1634 of the Civil Code establishes that parental authority includes directing the upbringing and education of children. My father failed in this duty when he abandoned me for 3 consecutive years." The lawyer choked on his own saliva. John Doe abruptly stopped laughing. "Article 1583 of the same code," she continued, "determines that custody shall be unilateral when one of the parents does not provide adequate conditions for the exercise of parental authority. Article 1586 establishes that this power cannot be exercised against the interest of the minor." The judge leaned forward, completely fascinated. In 30 years of his career, he had never seen an experienced lawyer cite laws with such fluency, much less a child. Additionally, Lily opened her homemade folder, a school folder decorated with unicorn stickers, but filled with organized documents. "I have evidence here that proves my father's true intentions." She pulled an old cell phone from the folder, a simple device that contrasted with the legal sophistication of her words. "I managed to record a conversation where he confesses that he only wants me because of the $2 million inheritance I'm going to receive from my grandfather." The bomb exploded in the courtroom. John Doe went pale as paper. Mr. Davis stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. From the back of the room, where she sat in the last row, Jane Doe, a thin, 32-year-old woman wearing a simple, clean blouse, covered her face with her hands and began to cry. "This is inadmissible!" Mr. Davis shouted, losing his composure completely. "Clandestine recording, illegal evidence. I ask that it be rejected." Lily looked at him with impressive calm. "Counselor, The recording is not clandestine when it's made by me to protect my own rights. Law 13441 of 2017, Article 4, Paragraph 2, guarantees a child the right to seek protection. The lawyer was speechless. A 7-year-old girl had just given him a law lesson. "Your Honor," Lily continued, "may I play the recording for everyone to hear?" The judge nodded, still trying to process the surreal situation. "Yes, you may." Lily manipulated the phone with small but steady fingers. John Doe's voice echoed through the courtroom, clear and incriminating. "Listen carefully, lawyer. I want the girl's custody and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to invent. The girl is going to inherit good money from her. Grandfather, when she turns 18, I'm talking about almost $2 million. If I get custody, I'm the one who manages that money." People in the audience began to shake their heads in indignation. It was impossible to hear that and not feel revolt. The girl's mother knows nothing about the inheritance. That woman can barely read, let alone understand inheritance. By the time she finds out anything, I'll have already handled everything. His cruel laughter on the recording made several people whisper obscenities under their breath. Jane Doe cried even louder, emotional and humiliated at the same time. "So it's settled. File the custody request tomorrow. Allege that the mother is unfit. Invent that she leaves the child alone, that she doesn't have a proper home. All those things you lawyers know how to do." Lily paused the recording, and silence again dominated the room. She looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, this conversation was recorded on March 15th at 2:30 in the afternoon. 3 days later, on the 18th, my father filed for custody, alleging exactly those lies." She pulled more papers from the folder. "Here's a copy of the petition. He claims my mother leaves me alone for hours, that our house doesn't have an adequate structure, that I don't have proper school supervision." The judge took the documents, checking each line. "And are these allegations true?" "They are all false, Your Honor." Lily organized other papers in front of her. "I brought evidence. To prove it, first, my school report card for the last 2 years. She extended the pages to the judge. "As you can see, I'm the best student in my class in all subjects: language arts, math, science, history, general average, 9.8. The judge examined the documents, impressed not only with the grades, but with the girl's impeccable organization. "Second," Lily continued, "a declaration from my school confirming that I'm never late, always well cared for, well fed, and that my mother actively participates in all school meetings." Mr. Davis tried to compose himself. "Your Honor, school documents can be easily manipulated by interested parties." "Are you accusing my school of falsifying documents?" Lily asked, turning to him with a serious expression that made the man swallow hard. "I didn't say that exactly. Because if you are, I can call my teacher, Ms. Green, here right now to testify. She's waiting in the court hallway." The judge smiled for the first time in the hearing. "Call your teacher, Lily." The courtroom door opened and Ms. Green entered. She was a 40-year-old woman with black hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a blue blouse and a black skirt that made her look more like a lawyer than a teacher. When she saw Lily conducting the hearing with such competence, her eyes filled with tears of pride. "Ms. Green," the judge addressed her, "can you tell us about student Lily's family situation?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ms. Green positioned herself beside Lily, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder in a gesture of support. "I've known Lily and her family for 2 years. Jane is an exemplary mother. She works very hard, but has never neglected her daughter's care. Does the child ever stay home alone?" "Never, Your Honor. Lily stays at school full-time. When classes end, she stays with me in the teacher's lounge doing homework until her mother picks her up. Always well-fed, with a clean uniform, complete school supplies." "And what about the father? Does he participate in school life?" Ms. Green looked directly at John Doe, who was trying to hide in his chair. In 2 years, Your Honor, he has appeared at the school exactly 0 times. He never asked about grades, behavior, or any special needs of his daughter. For all practical purposes, he simply does not exist in Lily's school life. That's not true, John Doe exploded, rising from his chair. I've always cared about my daughter. Lily turned to him, arms crossed, adopting a posture that impressed everyone present with its maturity. Then tell me, Dad, what's my teacher's full name? What grade am I in exactly? What's my favorite subject? What's my best friend's name? When's my birthday? John Doe was completely silent. He couldn't answer any basic questions about his own daughter. I'll help you, Lily said, with a coldness that cut through everyone present's heart. My teacher's name is Ms. Green. I'm in the 2nd grade of elementary school. My favorite subject is language. My best friend's name is Sarah. My birthday is September 12th. John Doe's embarrassment was visible to everyone. I don't need to memorize these things. You don't need to memorize, Dad. You need to be present. You need to be there. You need to truly love, not pretend to love for money. The courtroom fell into complete silence. That simple phrase from a 7-year-old child summarized the entire tragedy of the case. Your Honor, Lily continued, I have one more important piece of evidence. She took another document from the folder. Proof that my father hasn't paid child support for exactly 3 years and 2 months. $0. How do you survive? The judge asked, genuinely curious about the situation. My mother works as a cleaning assistant at Total Clean Company. She leaves home at 5 a.m. and returns at 8 p.m. She earns 1.5 times the minimum wage. It's not a lot of money, but she manages to give me everything a child needs. Food on the table, clean. Clothes, school supplies, medical care when necessary. Lily paused, looking at Jane Doe at the back of the room. And most importantly, Your Honor, she gives me true love every day. Jane Doe was weeping copiously, moved to hear her daughter defend her with such wisdom and maturity. Therefore, Lily turned her attention back to the judge. According to Article 1566 of the Civil Code, which establishes the duties of spouses and by extension parents of support, upbringing, and education of children, my father has failed in all aspects. Mr. Davis was officially out of arguments. A 7-year-old girl was giving him a law lesson that he could never counter. According to Article 1637 of the same code, Lily continued relentlessly, parental authority is extinguished by the practice of acts contrary to good morals. Abandoning a daughter for 3 years and then trying to use her as a source of income fits this definition perfectly. The judge made some notes, clearly impressed by the girl's legal knowledge. Lily, do you have anything else to present? Yes, Your Honor, but first, I'd like to exercise a right guaranteed by Law 13431 of 2017. What right? The right of the child to be heard in judicial proceedings that concern them. I want to speak directly to you about what I feel and what I want. The judge nodded solemnly. You may speak, Lily. The girl took a deep breath, organized her thoughts, and began to speak with a maturity that moved everyone present. Your Honor, for 7 years of my life, I wondered why my father didn't live with us, why he only showed up sometimes, why he never played with me like my friends' fathers. Her voice began to tremble slightly, but she remained firm. I thought maybe it was my fault, that I wasn't a good enough daughter, that if I got better grades, if I behaved better, maybe he would come home. Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. But 3 weeks ago, I discovered the truth. My father didn't abandon me because I wasn't good enough. He abandoned me because I'm just a child to him, not a daughter, and now he wants to use me as a tool to get rich. Lily turned to John Doe, who couldn't look her in the eyes. Dad, I don't hate you, but I also don't want to be your object of profit. I want to be loved for who I am, not for the money I can bring in. The courtroom was in absolute silence. Even the most experienced staff were visibly emotional. Therefore, Your Honor, I use this moment to make 2 official requests. What requests? First, that my custody remain with my mother, who truly loves me and raised me with dignity, even without much money. And the second, Lily took a deep breath before dropping the bomb that would leave everyone stunned. Second, I formally renounce my grandfather's inheritance. I don't want the $2 million. The courtroom exploded with exclamations of surprise. Even the judge's eyes widened. Lily, are you sure about what you're saying? I am. Absolutely sure, Your Honor. I prefer to live with love and dignity beside my mother than to be rich with a father who doesn't truly love me. John Doe stood up, desperate. She can't do that. She's a minor. She doesn't have the capacity to renounce. You're mistaken, Dad, Lily replied calmly. Article 1804 of the Civil Code allows for the renunciation of inheritance through a legal representative. My mother is my legal representative and will sign the renunciation on my behalf. Mr. Davis made one last desperate attempt. Your Honor, this is absurd. The minor is clearly being manipulated. Manipulated by whom, Counselor? The judge asked ironically. By the mother who works 12 hours a day to support her? By the teacher who taught her to defend herself? Or by the father who wants to use her to get rich? Lily approached the judge's bench. Your Honor, may I ask a personal question? You may. Do you have children? I have 2 children. And do they know you love them? Of course they do. I envy them, Lily said with devastating simplicity, because until today, I never knew if my father truly loved me. Now I know he doesn't. How do you know? Because someone who truly loves doesn't hurt the person they love. My father is willing to take me away from my mother, who is my whole life, just to access my money. That's not love, Your Honor. That's pure greed. The judge remained silent for long seconds, visibly touched by the maturity of that extraordinary child. Lily, he finally said, you are a very special girl. I've never seen anything like it in all my years of practice. Thank you, Your Honor. May I continue presenting the other evidence? Yes, you may, Ms. Lily. The affectionate nickname echoed through the courtroom as an official acknowledgement. That girl had won not only the judge's respect, but also that of everyone present. And she wasn't finished yet. She had more ammunition in her unicorn folder, more devastating evidence, more arguments. That would make John Doe regret forever having underestimated his daughter. The first round was over, and Lily had won by technical knockout, but the fight wasn't over yet. You may continue, Ms. Lily, the judge had said, and that affectionate nickname echoed through the courtroom as an official acknowledgement. Lily organized her papers with the precision of an experienced lawyer, while Mr. Davis sweated nervously and John Doe buried his face in his hands, knowing he was lost. Thank you. Your Honor, Lily said, pulling more documents from her unicorn folder. Now I will prove that all my father's allegations are fabricated lies. She carefully opened a laminated sheet. Here is the floor plan of our apartment, drawn by the building management itself. It has 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and laundry area. A total of 45 square meters. The judge examined the document. And what problem does your father allege about the living situation? He said in the petition that we live in an unhealthy room without minimal conditions for habitability. Lily read from the petition. But as you can see, we have adequate space for 2 people. Mr. Davis tried to defend himself. Your Honor, physical space does not mean adequate conditions. You're right, Counselor. Lily interrupted him politely. That's why I brought this. She pulled out a clear folder full of photos. Photographs of our house taken last week. As you can see, we have adequate furniture, a working refrigerator, a stove in perfect condition, a television, a study desk where I do my homework every day. The photos passed through the judge's hands. They showed a small apartment, but extremely clean and organized, with everything lovingly arranged. This is my bedroom, which I share with my mother, Lily continued, pointing to a photo. We have 2 beds, a wardrobe, a shelf with my school books. There's my study desk, where I learned all the laws I'm citing today. John Doe could no longer look at his daughter. He knew that every word she said was true, and every lie he had invented was being publicly exposed. My father also alleged that I stay home alone while my mother works. Lily continued, consulting the petition. That is false. Can I prove it? She pulled a letterhead paper from the folder. Here is a declaration from public school where I study. It confirms that I stay at school full-time from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And after 6? The judge asked. After 6, my mother picks me up and we go home together. We have dinner, she helps me with my homework, we watch television, and then we go to sleep. I'm never alone, Your Honor. Ms. Green, who was next to Lily, confirmed with a nod. That's true, Your Honor. Jane is punctual every day to pick up Lily. Mr. Davis made another desperate attempt. But what about on weekends and during school holidays? Lily smiled for the first time in the hearing. Excellent question, Counselor. On weekends, my mother doesn't work. We stay together all the time. We go to the park, to the supermarket. She teaches me to cook. And during holidays, I stay at Mrs. Johnson's house, our neighbor, who takes care of me while my mother works. And who is this Mrs. Johnson? The judge asked. Carol Johnson, retired, 68 years old. She lives in apartment 302 of our building for 15 years. She's also here today to testify, if necessary. The judge looked at the audience, and a kind, elderly lady waved from the third row. Madam, can you approach? Mrs. Johnson stood up with difficulty, supported by a cane, but with a proud smile on her face. She was a small woman with white hair, wearing a simple but impeccable floral dress. Mrs. Johnson, the judge addressed her gently. Do you know Lily's family? I've known them for 2 years, Counselor, she replied in a clear voice. Jane is a hard-working, honest woman, and Lily is an angel. During the holidays, she stays with me. We make cookies, watch TV shows. She teaches me things. From school. Does the child cause trouble, Mrs. Johnson? The old woman laughed. Trouble, my goodness, she helps me with everything. She washes the dishes, organizes my medications, reads the newspaper to me because my eyesight is weak. She's the granddaughter I never had. And the father, does Mr. Doe ever show up there? Mrs. Johnson's face grew serious. In 2 years, Counselor, I've seen him 3 times. 3 times. And out of those 3, 2 were just to argue with Jane about money. What kind of arguments? He'd show up wanting her to lend him money or asking to take the girl on weekends to impress his new girlfriend. But when Lily was sick or needed something, he'd disappear. John Doe tried to defend himself. That's not true! I've always worried about my daughter. Mrs. Johnson turned to him, pointing a finger. You worried about nothing, young man. When the girl had pneumonia last year, it was her mother who rushed her to the hospital. You didn't even know she was sick. I didn't know, John Doe stammered. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Mrs. Johnson retorted firmly. Jane called you 5 times. 5! You didn't answer any. Lily seized the moment. Your Honor, my father also alleged that I don't receive adequate medical care. I can prove that's a lie. She pulled out a folder full of medical papers. Here are all my medical exams from the last 2 years. Pediatrician appointments every 6 months, dentist every 4 months, all vaccines up to date. The judge leafed through the documents, impressed by the organization. And who pays for these appointments? My mother, Your Honor. She has health insurance from the company where she works. And when I need more expensive medicine, she works extra on weekends to get the money. What kind of extra work? She cleans private homes on Saturdays and Sundays, earning $50 per house. I've seen her clean 4 houses on a Saturday to buy my flu medicine. Jane Doe cried copiously. At the back of the room, moved to hear her daughter recount her sacrifices. Meanwhile, Lily continued, looking directly at John Doe. My father never paid a single dollar for my medical expenses, not even when I was hospitalized with pneumonia. I didn't know you were hospitalized, John Doe protested. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Lily replied coldly. My mother called you 7 times that day. You hung up on her. Mr. Davis tried to change strategy. Your Honor, financial issues are important, but they're not everything. What matters is the emotional bond. Emotional bond? Lily interrupted him. You want to talk about emotional bond, Counselor? She pulled more photos from the folder. These are photos from my last birthday parties, age 6, age 7. As you can see, present are my mother, Mrs. Johnson, my teacher, Ms. Green, some schoolmates. The judge examined the photos. They were simple parties, but full of affection. Lily blew out candles on a homemade cake, embraced by her mother. And where is your father in these photos? He's not in any of them, Your Honor, because he never came to my birthday parties. John Doe turned red. I was working on my 6th birthday. You were at a steakhouse with your girlfriend, Lily said without emotion. I saw the photos on her social media. For my 7th birthday, you were at a beach. I saw those photos too. John Doe's embarrassment was visible to everyone in the courtroom. He couldn't refute any of his daughter's accusations because all of them were true. Your Honor, Lily continued relentlessly, my father talks about emotional bond, but I can prove that this bond never existed on his part. She pulled a small notebook from the folder. This is my diary. I've been writing in it for 2 years. May I read some excerpts? You may. Lily opened the notebook to a marked page. September 15th last year, 3 days after my birthday. Today marks 3 days since I turned 7. Daddy didn't come to my party. Mom said he was busy, but I saw her cry in the bathroom. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. The innocence of those words broke hearts. October 23rd, she continued reading. Daddy came home today, stayed for half an hour. He brought a gift that still had the store tag. I think he bought it in a hurry. He didn't remember what my favorite doll was. Several people in the audience discreetly wiped their eyes. December 12th. Daddy called today, said he'd pick me up for a walk on Sunday. I waited for him from 2 to 6 in the afternoon. He didn't come. Mom made an excuse, but I know he forgot. John Doe could no longer look at his daughter. Every word from the diary was like a stab to his conscience. Do you want me to continue, Your Honor? Lily asked. I have here notes of 15 promises my father made and didn't keep. 15. You don't need to continue, the judge said gently. I understand. Counselor? Mr. Davis made one last attempt. Your Honor, children can exaggerate situations. Exaggerate? Lily turned to him with indignation. Counselor, do you have children? I do. Have you ever forgotten their birthday? Never. Have you ever promised an outing and not kept it? No. Have you gone months without seeing them? Never. Then don't say I'm exaggerating. You wouldn't let your children go through this, but you think it's normal for me to. The lawyer was speechless. A 7-year-old girl had just given him a lesson in parenthood. Your Honor? Lily continued, turning her attention back to the judge. I want to present one more important piece of evidence. She pulled a sealed envelope from the folder. Here are all the messages my mother sent to my father over the last 2 years. Text messages, instant messages, all printed and authenticated. The judge received the envelope. What kind of messages? Messages about me, informing him about medical appointments, school grades, school presentations, health problems. My mother always tried to keep my father informed about my life, and he rarely responded, and when he did, it was always with a single word. Okay? Right. Cool. He never asked for details, never truly cared. Lily opened the envelope and took out some sheets. May I read some? You may. Message from May 15th. John, Lily had a presentation at school today. She talked about professions and said she wants to be a lawyer to defend people. She was beautiful. Lily paused. His response, okay. Message. From July 3rd, Lily got a 10 on her language arts test. The teacher said she writes better than many older children. I'm very proud. Another pause. His response, cool. Message from August 18th. John, Lily's had a fever for 2 days. I'm taking her to the doctor tomorrow. If you want to come along, the appointment is at 9 a.m. at the clinic. A longer pause. His response, none. He didn't even reply. The courtroom was in total silence. It was impossible to hear that and not be moved. Your Honor, Lily said, putting the messages away, is this an emotional bond? Is this a present father? Is this paternal love? The judge shook his head negatively. No, Lily, it definitely is not. Therefore, she continued, when I found out my father wants my custody only to manage my inheritance, I wasn't surprised. I was sad, but not surprised. She turned to John Doe one last time. Dad, for 7 years I dreamed that one day you would truly love me, that you would want to spend time with me, meet my friends, help me with homework, comfort me when I was sad. Her voice began to tremble, but she remained firm. Now I understand that will never happen, because to love a person, you first need to see them as a person, not an object. John Doe tried to speak. Lily, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She cut him off. I understand that to you, I'm just a means to get rich. And you know what else? I accept that, but I won't be an accomplice. She turned to the judge. Therefore, Your Honor, in addition to renouncing the inheritance, I have one last request. What? I want it recorded in the minutes that I do not wish for any kind of visitation or contact with my father. I don't want to be forced to meet with someone who sees me as money, not as a daughter. The final bomb exploded in the courtroom. John Doe stood up, desperate. You can't do this. I'm your father. Father by blood, Lily replied with devastating calm. Father by heart is the one who raised me, educated me, loved me every day. That was my mother. Mr. Davis was officially defeated. There was no longer any legal or emotional argument that could save his client. Your Honor, Lily made her final conclusion. Based on all the evidence presented, I request that my custody remain exclusively with my mother, Jane Doe, and that any future request for visitation by the petitioner John Doe be denied. She closed her unicorn folder with the solemnity of an experienced lawyer. These were the proofs I had to present. The judge remained silent for long seconds, processing everything he had witnessed. Never, in 3 decades of his career, had he seen anything as impressive as that 7-year-old girl defending her own family with the competence of an experienced jurist. Lily, he finally said, you are an extraordinary girl. Your arguments are impeccable, your evidence is irrefutable, and your maturity is impressive. Thank you, Your Honor. But before I give my decision, I need to ask a question. How did you learn all this? How did a 7-year-old child manage to master family law with such precision? Lily smiled for the second time in the hearing. That's a long story, Your Honor. It started 3 weeks ago when I discovered the truth about my father. You may tell us. The entire courtroom leaned forward, curious to know how that extraordinary girl had come so far. I can, Lily said. But it's a story that will explain not only how I learned law, but how I discovered that love is worth more than any money in the world. The judge settled back in his chair. I'm listening, Ms. Lily. It was time to tell how it all began, how an ordinary girl had transformed into a small warrior capable of facing her own father in court, and how she had discovered that sometimes children need to teach adults what really matters in life. The story was only halfway through, and the best was yet to come. It all started 3 weeks ago, Lily said, looking at the judge with the same seriousness she had maintained throughout the hearing. It was a rainy Thursday, March 15th, at 2 p.m. I was in my room playing school with my dolls when I heard my father talking on the phone. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Everyone wanted to understand how that extraordinary girl had come so far. It wasn't normal for him to call our house, she continued. He hadn't been in touch for almost 6 months. My mother was at work, so I was alone with my dolls, pretending to be their teacher. She paused as if reliving that moment. I heard his voice coming from the living room and thought, how strange for Dad to be here. because normally he didn't even come inside the house. When he came to pick me up for an outing, he would wait in the lobby of the building. The judge leaned forward, completely absorbed in the narrative. Then I realized he was talking on the phone. He wasn't actually in the living room, but his voice was very loud. So I left my dolls and went to the bedroom door to listen better. Lily took a deep breath, as if preparing to relive the most painful moment of her life. The first thing I heard was, "Listen carefully, lawyer. I want the girl's custody, and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to invent." And I thought, girl? What girl? Is he talking about me? The courtroom remained in sepulchral silence. Even the staff had stopped typing to listen. Then he continued, "The girl is going to inherit good money from her grandfather when she turns 18. I'm talking about almost $2 million. And that's when my world fell apart, Your Honor." Lily's voice trembled slightly, but she remained firm. $2 million. I didn't even know I had a rich grandfather, let alone that I was going to inherit anything. But what hurt me most wasn't discovering the money. It was realizing that my father was talking about me as if I were an object, not a person. Jane Doe cried softly at the back of the room, reliving the pain her daughter had felt that day. Then he said, "If I get custody, I'm the one who manages that money." And I understood everything, Your Honor. My father didn't want me back because he missed me, because he loved me, because he wanted to be my real father. He wanted me as a bank account. Lily paused to control her emotions, but the part that hurt the most came next. He said, "The girl's mother knows nothing about the inheritance. That woman can barely read, let alone understand inheritance." The contempt in her voice, as she repeated her father's words, made several people in the courtroom shake their heads in indignation. At that moment, Your Honor, I felt a rage I had never felt in my life, not for myself, but for my mother. How dare he speak like that about the woman who raised me alone, the woman who works 12 hours a day to give me everything I need? Lily turned to look at Jane Doe at the back of the room. My mother may not have studied much, but she's the smartest person I know. She can do mental math better than any calculator. She knows when I'm sad just by looking at my face. She knows how to make the best chocolate cake in the world with simple ingredients. Some people in the audience smiled through their tears. After that, he said, "By the time she finds out anything, I'll have already handled everything." And he laughed. Laughed at my mother, laughed at me, laughed at the whole situation as if it were a big joke. Lily's indignation was palpable. That's when I understood I had to do something. I couldn't let him use our ignorance about the inheritance to separate us. So I did something I learned from watching detective movies on television. "What did you do?" the judge asked curiously. I ran to the bedroom, got my mother's cell phone, and went back to the door. I put the phone on record and captured the rest of the conversation. Mr. Davis attempted an objection. "Your Honor, clandestine recording." "Counselor," Lily interrupted him politely, "I was 7 years old and trying to protect my family. I didn't know I was making a clandestine recording. I just knew I needed proof of what my father was planning." The judge nodded in agreement. "Continue, Lily." "I managed to record when he said, 'File the custody request tomorrow. Allege that the mother is unfit. Invent that she leaves the child alone, that she doesn't have a proper home. All those things you lawyers know how to do.'" The courtroom became tense. Everyone was listening to how that judicial farce had been planned. And the final part, "That woman can barely read. By the time she finds out anything, I'll have already handled everything," followed by that cruel laugh that made me want to vomit. Lily paused for a few seconds, as if reliving the nausea of that moment. When he hung up, I ran to the bathroom and vomited. Not because I was sick, but because I had discovered that my own father was capable of lying in court to use me as a tool for enrichment. The silence in the courtroom was embarrassing. Then I sat on the bathroom floor, crying for almost an hour. I didn't know what to do with that information, how to tell my mother that her ex-husband was planning a legal trap. Ms. Green, who was next to Lily, squeezed the girl's shoulder in silent support. When my mother came home from work that night, I watched her taking off her aching shoes, complaining of back pain, but always with a smile for me. And I thought, how am I going to destroy her peace by telling her this? "And what did you decide to do?" the judge asked. First, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. We had dinner together. She helped me with my homework. We watched a cartoon on TV, but when we went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking. Lily looked at the courtroom ceiling as if reliving the scene. I stayed awake all night watching my mother sleep. She slept beside me in our small bedroom after a full day of hard work, and I thought, she doesn't deserve to go through. And this, she doesn't deserve to be deceived again. Again, the judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. My father had already deceived my mother before. When he left home, he said he was going to take some time to think about his life. She waited for him to come back for almost a year. Then she found out he was living with another woman. John Doe sank further into his chair, being publicly exposed for all his lies and betrayals. The next day, Friday, I went to school with an idea in my head, to tell everything to my teacher, Ms. Green. She had always been like a second mother to me. Ms. Green smiled through her tears, proud of the trust Lily had placed in her. During recess, instead of playing with my friends, I went to the classroom where Aunt Green was grading papers. I knocked on the door and asked if I could talk to her about something very serious. "And how did she react?" the judge asked. "She saw that I was different. Normally I'm a happy, playful child, but that day I was serious, worried. She immediately put down her papers and gave me her full attention." Lily turned to Ms. Green with gratitude. I told her everything, the call, the inheritance, my father's plan, the recording I had made. She listened in absolute silence, and when I finished, I saw tears in her eyes. What did she say? The first thing she said was, "Lily, you are a very brave girl." Then she asked if I was sure about everything I had heard. I asked her to listen to the recording. Ms. Green confirmed with a nod. It was one of the most shocking moments of my career as a teacher. When she heard the recording, Lily continued, Aunt Green was outraged. She said it was inadmissible, that my father had no right to toy with our family that way. And what was her advice? She said I needed to tell my mother everything immediately, that my mother had a right to know what was happening, even if it was painful. Lily looked at Jane Doe at the back of the room, but I was scared. Your Honor, scared that my mother wouldn't know how to defend herself. She's always been very simple, very trusting of people. I knew she would be lost in a courtroom facing expensive lawyers and serious judges. That's when Aunt Green told me something that changed everything. What did she tell you? That before she was a teacher, she had studied law for 2 years in college. She didn't graduate because she had to work to support her family, but she knew the basic laws about family and children. The courtroom paid close attention. It was the crucial moment of the story. She explained that there was a legal possibility for me to represent my family in court, not as an official lawyer, of course, but as a family assistant. She said it was rare, but the law allowed it. And did you accept this possibility? At first I thought it was crazy. How could a 7-year-old girl face trained lawyers in court? But then Aunt Green asked me a question that changed my perspective. What question? She asked. Lily, what's more important, being afraid or protecting those you love? And at that moment, I understood that I had no choice. Either I learned to defend myself, or my father would manage to separate us. Lily took a deep breath, reliving that moment of decision. That's when I told Aunt Green, then teach me everything I need to know to defend my mother. And she replied, Lily, it's going to be very difficult. You'll have to study complicated laws, memorize articles, understand things that even adults have difficulty with. And you didn't give up? On the contrary, Your Honor. The more she said it was difficult, the more certain I was that I would succeed, because when you truly love someone, nothing is too difficult. The courtroom was completely absorbed by the narrative. That same afternoon, Aunt Green went to our house to talk to my mother. She told her everything: the call, the inheritance, my father's plan, my idea of defending us in court. How did your mother react? First she cried a lot, not out of sadness but out of anger. Anger at having been deceived again. Anger at seeing that her ex-husband wanted to use her daughter as an object. Jane Doe confirmed with a nod, remembering that painful day. Then she became desperate. How will I defend myself, she asked. I don't understand anything about law. I don't have money for a lawyer. I'm going to lose my daughter to that terrible man. Is that when you stepped in? Yes. I approached my mother, held her hands and said, Mom, you're not going to lose me. I'm going to be your lawyer. I'm going to learn everything necessary to protect our family. Lily smiled, remembering that moment. My mother looked at me as if I'd gone crazy. Lily, you're 7 years old. But I replied, so what? I'm 7 years old, but I have enough love for you to face the whole world. Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. Aunt Green explained to my mother that it was possible, that I could represent our family with her supervision, that we would study together, prepare all the evidence, organize all the arguments. And your mother agreed. At first she hesitated. She was afraid that I would be exposed to a situation too heavy for my age. But when I showed her the recording of my father, when she heard with her own ears his contempt for our family, she understood that we had no choice. Lily looked directly at John Doe. My mother heard you talking about her as if she were trash, Dad. She heard you planning to deceive us, use us, separate us, and then she understood that she had to fight. John Doe couldn't maintain eye contact with his daughter. That night, the three of us sat at the kitchen table and made a pact. We were going to study together, work together, fight together. We weren't going to let anyone destroy our family for money. And how did the studies begin? On Saturday morning, Aunt Green appeared at our house with a suitcase full of law books. Civil Code, Child and Adolescent Statute, Federal Constitution. It looked like she had brought an entire library. Lily laughed, remembering the scene. She spread all the books on our small kitchen table and said, Lily, if you want to be your mother's lawyer, you need to study like one. Let's start with the basics. What is parental authority? Was it difficult at first? Very difficult, Your Honor. The first words I read seemed to be in another. Language, parental authority, unilateral custody, best interest of the minor. I didn't understand anything. How did you overcome that difficulty? Aunt Green was very patient. She explained each legal term in simple words. For example, when I read parental authority, she explained, it's the right and duty of parents to care for their children, but this power has limits. It cannot be used against the child's interest. Lily looked at Ms. Green with gratitude. She transformed complicated laws into language I could understand. And the most incredible thing, the more I learned, the more interested I became. It was as if I had discovered a secret language that could protect people. How much time did you study per day? Every day after school, from 6 to 9 p.m., weekends from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., with breaks for lunch and snacks. The judge was impressed. 3 weeks of intensive study. Exactly. And do you know what the most interesting part was, Your Honor? What? I discovered that I had a knack for memorizing laws. It was as if my brain was a sponge for legal information. In 1 week, I was already memorizing entire articles of the Civil Code. Ms. Green confirmed proudly. Lily has an exceptional intelligence for law. In 2 weeks, she knew more about custody and parental authority than many lawyers. But the most important part of the studies wasn't memorizing laws, Lily continued. It was understanding that the law exists to protect people, especially the most vulnerable. And at that moment, my mother and I were the most vulnerable. What do you mean? My father had money to hire an expensive lawyer. He knew about the inheritance that we didn't. He had experience manipulating situations. We only had one thing in our favor. What? The truth. Lily said with devastating simplicity, and I discovered that when you have the truth on your side and know the laws that protect that truth, you can face any opponent. The courtroom was moved by that life. Lesson coming from a 7-year-old child. That's how, Your Honor, an ordinary girl transformed into her own mother's lawyer, not out of ambition, not out of revenge, but out of pure and simple love. Lily looked at everyone in the courtroom. And now you know how I got here. Through 3 weeks of the most intense studies of my life, driven by the determination not to let anyone destroy my family. The judge remained silent for a few seconds, processing that extraordinary story. Lily, he finally said, you are living proof that when a child is moved by true love, they can move mountains. Thank you, Your Honor. But the story isn't over yet. How so? I still need to tell you how I transformed all this knowledge into a strategy for this court and how I prepared every piece of evidence I presented today. The judge smiled. Then continue, Ms. Lily. We are all curious to hear the rest. It was time to tell the second part of that extraordinary journey, how a 7-year-old girl had prepared to face her own father in the most important court case of her life. After 2 weeks of studying law, Lily continued her narrative for the fascinated courtroom. I already knew all the laws about custody and parental authority, but Aunt Green taught me that knowing the law is only half the job. The other half is knowing how to use that knowledge in court. The judge settled further into his chair, completely absorbed in the story. It was on a Monday, April 3rd, that Aunt Green arrived at our house with news that changed everything. She had received a call from the school informing her that a court officer had delivered a judicial summons to my mother. Jane confirmed with a sad nod. She remembered that terrible day perfectly. My mother opened the envelope with trembling hands, Lily continued. It was my father's official petition requesting my custody. When she started to read it aloud, I saw that everything was exactly as he had planned in the phone conversation. What were the allegations? The judge asked, although he already knew the answer. Material and emotional abandonment by my mother, neglect in medical care, inadequate family environment, lack of school supervision, all lies, but very well elaborated legally. Lily paused, remembering her mother's desperate expression. My mother started to cry and said, Lily, how will I prove this is a lie? Who will believe a cleaning lady against a man who has money to hire an expensive lawyer? And that's when I understood that I needed to be more than a child who knew laws. I needed to be a true strategist. Ms. Green smiled proudly, remembering that turning point. Aunt Green sat with me at the kitchen table and said, Lily, now we're going to turn you into a real lawyer. It's not enough to know the laws. You need to learn how to build a solid defense, organize evidence, anticipate the opponent's arguments. How did you do that? The judge asked, genuinely curious. First, Aunt Green taught me to think like a lawyer. She said, imagine you're your father's lawyer. What arguments would you use? And I started listing them. I would say my mother works a lot and leaves me alone, that our house is small, that she's uneducated, that she can't give me a better future. Lily showed impressive maturity in analyzing the situation. Then she asked, and how would you rebut each of these arguments? That's when my true legal education began. Explain better. For every lie my father told, we needed irrefutable proof. He said I stay home alone. We were going to prove that I stay at school full time. He said our house is inadequate. We were going to photograph every room. He said I don't have medical supervision. We were going to gather all the exams and consultations. The courtroom followed every word with total attention. But Aunt Green taught me that it wasn't enough to have the evidence. I needed to know how to present it convincingly. Lily, she said, in court it's not enough to be right. You need to prove you're right. And how did you organize this evidence? We turned our house into a real law firm. The kitchen table became our workstation. My mother bought several plastic folders, and we started organizing everything by categories. Lily gestured as she explained, showing the same organization she had demonstrated in court. Folder number 1, school documents, report cards, declarations, attendance history, letters of recommendation from the teacher. Folder number 2, medical documents, exams, prescriptions, proof of consultations, updated vaccination card. How many folders did you make? 8 folders, Your Honor. Folder 3, house documents, rental agreement, paid bills on time, photos of all rooms. Folder 4, financial proofs, my mother's salary receipts, bank statements, invoices for everything she bought for me. The judge was impressed by the meticulous organization. Folder 5, evidence of paternal abandonment, all the messages my mother sent to my father without response, photos of my birthdays where he didn't appear, proof that he never paid child support. John Doe cowered further in his chair, seeing his negligence systematically documented. Folder 6, testimonials from people who know us, Mrs. Johnson, neighbors, school staff. Folder 7, the recording of my father's conversation and all the legal analyses we made about it. And Folder 8. Folder 8 was special. Lily smiled for the first time during the flashback. It was my folder of legal arguments, all the articles of law I had memorized, organized by theme, with simple explanations that I wrote myself. Ms. Green leaned forward. May I add, Your Honor? Of course. Lily created her own study system. She would take each article of law, read it several times until she memorized it, then write in her own words what that article meant in practice. For example, Article 1634 of the Civil Code. Lily recited from memory. The law says both parents, regardless of their marital status, shall have the full exercise of parental authority. My translation: it doesn't matter if parents are married or separated, both are responsible for their children. The judge smiled. Very intelligent. But then comes the practical part, Lily continued. Since my father abandoned this responsibility for 3 years, he lost the right to claim parental authority only when it financially suited him. Did you study every possible argument of the defense? All of them, Your Honor. Aunt Green played the role of my father's lawyer, and I had to rebut every argument. It was like a game, but a very serious game. Give me an example. She would say, Lily, your father's lawyer will allege that he has better financial conditions to raise you. And I would respond, Article 1583 of the Civil Code establishes that custody must consider not only material conditions, but primarily emotional bonds and the ability to provide adequate education and development. The courtroom was impressed by the meticulous preparation. Then I would add, my mother may not have much money, but she gave me an exemplary education, constant medical care, and most importantly, unconditional love. My father has money, but he doesn't have love. And money without love doesn't raise healthy children. How did you simulate the hearing? Oh, that was the most important part of the preparation. Lily brightened. Aunt Green transformed our living room into a mini courtroom. She would sit in a high chair playing the judge. My mother would sit in the audience, and I had to present all the arguments as if it were the real hearing. And how was it at first? Terrible, Lily laughed. I would get nervous, forget the laws, stammer. But Aunt Green was patient. She would say, Lily, you're not just defending a case, you're defending your family. Remember that when you get nervous. Ms. Green confirmed. We repeated the simulation more than 20 times until Lily could present all the arguments naturally. But the most difficult part wasn't memorizing the laws, Lily continued. It was preparing myself emotionally to face my father. The courtroom paid close attention. It was the most delicate moment of the preparation. Aunt Green explained to me that in court, my father and his lawyer would try to discredit me, humiliate me, make me look like a child playing adult. She said, Lily, they will attack you personally because they can't. Attack your arguments. How did you prepare for that? By practicing staying calm in difficult situations. Aunt Green simulated the attacks I might receive. She would say things like, you're just a child, you don't understand anything about law. and I had to respond calmly, citing laws and maintaining politeness. Did it work? It took me a while to learn. At first, I would get angry and want to shout back, but Aunt Green taught me that in court, whoever loses composure loses credibility. Lily looked directly at Mr. Davis, who had tried to discredit her throughout the hearing. She taught me that when someone attacks you personally, instead of attacking your arguments, it's because they have no arguments to rebut. And that's a victory, not a defeat. What an important lesson. The most important lesson came 3 days before the hearing. Lily continued. I was nervous, afraid of failing, afraid of losing my mother. Aunt Green sat with me and said, Lily, do you want to know what your greatest power in court is? What was it? She said, your greatest power is the truth. You won't win because you're intelligent, although you are. You won't win because you know laws, although you do. You'll win because you're defending what's right. The courtroom fell silent, absorbing that profound lesson. Your father is lying, she continued. His lawyer knows he's lying. The judge will realize they're lying. And when people lie in court to harm a child, they always lose. Did that reassure you? Completely, because I understood that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be honest and well prepared. And how was the final preparation? On the eve of the hearing, we had our last simulation, but this time, instead of practicing legal arguments, Aunt Green asked me a different question. What question, Lily? If you could say just one thing to the judge, what would it be? And I answered without hesitation that I don't want to be rich with a father who doesn't love me. I'd rather be happy with a mother who truly loves me. Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. Aunt Green smiled and said, There, you're prepared, because that sentence is worth more than all the legal articles in the world. And did you sleep well the night before? I slept poorly, Lily admitted. I kept imagining what it would be like to face my father, what it would be like to speak to a real judge, what it would be like if I failed. But my mother noticed I was worried. She lay down next to me in bed and said, Lily, no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm already proud of you. Seeing my 7-year-old daughter fighting to defend our family is the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Jane cried softly, remembering that night of anguish and pride. Then she told me something that changed everything. She said, Do you know why I'm so calm, even knowing I might lose you? Because if I lose you, it won't be due to my omission. It will be because we fought together, and fate wanted it that way, but at least we'll know we did everything possible. Did that calm you? Totally, because I understood that the outcome didn't depend only on me. It depended on justice, truth, and the love that drove our entire struggle. And how was the morning of the hearing? I woke up at 5 a.m., even without an alarm clock. I showered, put on my best clothes, a white blouse and a blue skirt that my mother had bought especially for court. Were you nervous? I was, but it was a different kind of nervousness. It wasn't fear of failing, it was eagerness to show everything I had learned. And your mother? My mother was more nervous than me. Lily smiled. She reviewed my folder 3 times, checked if I had brought all the documents, asked if I remembered all the laws and the way to the courthouse. On the bus, I mentally reviewed all the arguments, but I also did something Aunt Green had taught me. What? I prayed. I'm not very religious, but I asked God to give me strength to defend my family with dignity. And when we arrived at the courthouse, when I saw that large, imposing building full of serious people in suits, my heart pounded. I thought, how is a 7-year-old girl going to face all this? What gave you courage? My mother held my hand and said, Remember, my daughter, you're not here to impress anyone. You're here to tell the truth. And Aunt Green added, and the truth always wins in the end. Is that when you entered? We walked together to the courtroom door. Before entering, I made sure to organize my folder, take a deep breath, and visualize everything I had studied. And what was your first thought when you saw the judge? I thought he seems like a good person. Someone who will listen to what I have to say, and that's when all my preparation made sense. How so? Because I understood that I wasn't there to show I was smart or to impress anyone. I was there to protect my family using the tools I had learned. Lily looked at the judge with gratitude, and when I introduced myself saying, "I am my mum's lawyer," it wasn't a child playing adult, it was a daughter defending the one she loves most in the world. The courtroom fell into emotional silence. That's how, Your Honor, 3 weeks of intensive study, unconditional love, and iron determination transformed an ordinary girl into the youngest lawyer this court has ever seen. "And now, Lily?" the judge asked. "How do you feel after telling this whole story?" "I feel at peace, Your Honor, because regardless of your decision, I know I fought with honor for my family and discovered that when a child is moved by true love, they can move mountains." Lily closed her unicorn folder for the last time. "That's what I wanted to tell about how I became my mother's lawyer, not out of ambition, not out of revenge, but out of pure and true love." The judge remained silent for long seconds, processing that extraordinary story of courage, determination, and family love. It was time to return to the present. It was time for the decision that would forever change the life of that brave family. Judge Robert Smith remained in absolute silence for almost 2 minutes after Lily finished her narrative. 2 minutes that felt like 2 hours for everyone in the courtroom. He removed his glasses, cleaned them carefully, looked at that extraordinary 7-year-old girl, and then at the documents spread on his desk. "Lily," he finally said, with a voice that carried 3 decades of experience. "In 30 years of my career, I've witnessed thousands of cases. I've seen brilliant lawyers, moving witnesses, irrefutable evidence, but never, ever have I seen anything like what I witnessed today." The courtroom was in sepulchral silence. Every person present knew they were experiencing a unique moment in the history of justice in this region. "You are not just an intelligent girl who memorized some laws," the judge continued, looking directly into Lily's brown eyes. "You are a living example that true justice is born from love, courage, and the determination to protect those we love." John Doe buried his face in his hands, knowing that his defeat was total and irreversible. Mr. Davis nervously organized his papers, not knowing how to react to the public humiliation he had suffered. Based on all the evidence presented, the judge stood solemnly, and considering the clear and unequivocal manifestation of the minor Lily regarding her own desires, this court decides that the silence was deafening. Jane held Miss Green's hands, both crying with anxiety. Mrs. Johnson prayed softly. Lily maintained her erect posture, prepared for any outcome. The custody of the minor Lily remains exclusively with her mother Jane Doe, and the request of the petitioner John Doe is denied. The courtroom erupted in applause. People who didn't even know the family clapped, moved. Court officials, normally serious and impartial, smiled openly. Jane collapsed, crying, with relief and happiness. "Furthermore," the judge continued when silence returned, "I determine that any future requests for visitation or contact by the petitioner be denied, as requested by the minor herself." John Doe tried to stand up. "Your Honor, this is—" "Mr. Doe," the judge interrupted him with authority, "you had 7 years to be a father to this exceptional child. You chose abandonment. Now you want to return only for financial interest. This court does not condone this type of opportunism. But I have rights. Rights are earned by fulfilling duties," Lily said, standing up from her chair. "You never fulfilled your duties as a father, therefore you lost all rights." The judge banged his gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." But the story was just beginning. 3 months later, Jane's cell phone rang at 7 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. On the other end of the line, an excited voice. "Ms. Doe, this is from the TV news. Lily's story has gone national. We'd like to do an interview for a major show." It was true. The recording of the hearing, authorized by the judge for educational purposes, had spread across the internet like wildfire. Lily the lawyer was trending. Legal pages shared her legal arguments. Mothers cried watching her emotional defense of her family. "Mom, look at this!" Lily shouted from the living room, pointing to the television. On the screen, her speech about love versus money was playing on the morning news. "I don't want to be famous," Lily said with the same maturity as always. "I want other children to see that they can fight for their rights." 5 years later, Lily at age 12. "Lily Doe to speak at the National Assembly," announced the speaker. She ascended the main podium, now 12 years old, taller, more mature, but with the same determined eyes as when she was 7. "Distinguished representatives," her voice echoed through the crowded chamber. 5 years ago, a 7-year-old girl stood up in a courtroom and said, "I am my mom's lawyer." Today, that same girl returns to show what her struggle achieved. The audience fell into respectful silence. Today, I propose the child legal education law, that all schools in the country have a mandatory subject called children's rights, where boys and girls learn their basic rights, how to protect themselves, how to report abuse. "Can children understand laws?" a representative asked. "Yes, they can. I learned law at 7, not because I'm special, but because when a child needs to defend themselves, they learn anything." Lily looked at the audience with intensity. Imagine a country where no child is a victim of abuse because they all know they can report it, where no child is manipulated in separations because they all know their rights, where no child needs to become their own mother's lawyer because all families know how to defend themselves. The ovation lasted 5 minutes. The law was approved unanimously. 9 years later, Lily, at age 21, the law school had never seen such a sought-after graduation. Journalists, politicians, jurists, families who had been helped by the Lily Law. Everyone wanted to see the girl who changed the country's legal system officially graduate. "Lily Doe," announced the dean, "graduated with honors, top student in her class." When she went up to the stage to receive her diploma, the audience erupted in applause that lasted 10 minutes. Jane cried with pride in the front row next to Ms. Green. "Fellow graduates," Lily said into the microphone, "today we officially become lawyers, but being a lawyer isn't just about knowing laws, it's about using those laws to protect those who need it. Therefore, today, I announce the creation of the Lily Doe Institute for the Defense of Children's Rights, an office that will offer free legal defense to all children in vulnerable situations." The ovation was deafening. 7 years later, Lily, at age 28. The Person of the Year award arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Lily was in her office when she received the call. "Miss Doe, congratulations, you have been chosen as Person of the Year." At 28, she had become the youngest person from her country to receive the award. On the magazine cover, "The Girl Who Changed Justice: How Lily Doe Revolutionized Children's Rights Worldwide." The Lily Doe Institute now operated in 12 countries, having protected over 50,000 children. "Mom, look at this." Lily showed the magazine to Jane, now coordinating the Institute's social work. "My daughter is on the cover of a major magazine," Jane said, crying with pride. "Who would have thought that little girl would change the world?" "I didn't change the world, Mom. I just used what you taught me, that love is worth more than money." That night, at the awards dinner in a prominent city, Lily gave a speech that moved the entire world. 21 years ago, she said into the microphone, a 7-year-old girl stood up in a courtroom and said, "I am my mum's lawyer." Today, that phrase has become a symbol that children have a voice, have rights, and have the power to transform the world. The international audience was silent, but I want to make it clear, I'm not special. I'm just a child who had to grow up fast to protect those I loved. And I discovered that when we are moved by true love, we are capable of extraordinary things. Applause echoed through the auditorium. Today, more than 100 countries have adopted versions of the Lily Law. Millions of children have access to justice. Families are protected from greed, all because a 7-year-old girl refused to be silenced. Lily looked at the cameras broadcasting live worldwide. Therefore, I leave a message for all children who may be watching. You have a voice, you have rights. And when something is wrong in your life, do not accept silence. Fight, seek help, protect those you love. Because sometimes, she concluded with a smile that recalled the courageous 7-year-old girl, the smallest voices are the ones that echo loudest. In history, the standing ovation lasted 15 minutes, but for Lily, the most important prize remained the same as 21 years ago, having protected her family and discovered that love always triumphs over money. Her story had begun with a 7-year-old girl saying, "I am my mom's lawyer," and would forever continue as proof that when a child is moved by true love, she can truly change the world. End of story.